Oh, okay. So I'm going to talk today about paid parental leave. Moms and dads really just aren't getting paid parental leave in the United States. The federal government did create the Family and Medical Leave Act, but the regulations are pretty unrealistic and they don't really benefit a lot of Americans. So, according to the US Department of Labor, the FMLA allows eligible employees to have unpaid parental leave. So, not only is it unpaid, but the eligible part of the employees is really strict. So, it means that to be eligible, you have to have a covered employer, which is any employer that has 50 employees in a 75-mile radius, or any public government agency, or any private or public elementary or secondary school. So those are the three covered employer options. But on top of having a covered employer, you also have to work for that company for at least 12 months. And you also have to accumulate 1,250 hours before you can even get the unpaid medical leave. And it's only a 3 month unpaid medical leave. So it sounds like a lot of coverage, but the limitations are kind of harsh and it's hard for most Americans to meet this criteria. So Helene Jorgensen did a study on the FMLA and she found that only 56% of the private sector employees are actually eligible to use this leave, which means that if you look at it from like a newborn perspective, 44% of new babies are completely without mom and dad because they're not eligible to get unpaid leave. So this leads to a lot of emotional issues. So mom has to pump the milk ahead of time if she chooses to breastfeed. They're going to miss out on baby moments like, cute smiles, first giggles, first whatever. And on top of that, the baby isn't getting that skin to skin contact with mom that's really, really important for nourishment and growth. It allows them to feel safe and it really just helps them develop a lot quicker than being at a daycare. And so on top of that, aside from all the emotional and, stress of it all, there's also no financial stability. So if moms and dads are already paying for other children, they're paying for themselves, and now they've added a newborn to the mix. And if you just think about all that a newborn requires, diapers, formulas, clothes, bottles, cribs, car seats, I mean, it's not a cheap list and it probably creates a lot of financial stress on moms and dads who are trying to deal with newborns in the house. So, in a study done with Pew Research Center, 41 countries participated. And out of the 41 countries, the United States was the only country that didn't have paid parental legislation for new parents. I think that the United States views itself as a world leader. And if we're going to be a world leader, we need to be up to date with what other countries are doing and if it's working and things like that. And I just think it's unacceptable for the United States to not have such an important program in place to help develop new world leaders. I mean, newborns need a lot of care and attention, and they're not going to get that if moms and dads can't take off work. So here's my plan. I don't want to just completely demolish the policy. I would just like to expand it and make necessary changes that allow it to move forward with those improvements. By doing this, Congress doesn't have to spend the time it takes to completely recreate a new program. And also, it kind of alleviates their stress because there's already multiple states that have paid leaves in place that we could use to model off of. So it's not like they're just starting from scratch. For instance, like California, they have a paid family leave program and it provides up to 6 weeks of leave with 55% of their weekly income provided. And while it's only 6 weeks and it's a reduced income, it's still something versus just unpaid leave. And so what happens there is Cornell University actually did a study in their accredited research school. They did a study on the paid leave program in California, and they found that it really gives parents time to bond with their newborn. And it also includes people to take off for like ill family members, so elderly parents, special needs, chronic diseases, that sort of thing. So it's not only benefiting moms and dads of new babies, which is really nice too. So it's financed by a payroll tax and it builds off of California's state disability insurance program, which was originally created to help workers with disability who still need to, live and have expenses. So they just added on to that and added a pregnancy aspect. So pregnancy related disabilities are covered under that as well. And it also includes in the pregnancy disabilities like bonding and caring for a newborn. So similar to the state disability insurance program, you also have the Paid Family Leave Act, which is structured just like an insurance program. So there's no direct cost to employers, which is kind of huge. So employers aren't paying anything out of their pocket to implement this program. Instead, it just comes out of an employee paid payroll tax. And the best part about this is that in California, you can combine the state disabilities insurance program and the paid family leave program and use both of them simultaneously. So the state disability typically benefits 4 weeks before delivery and then 6 to 8 weeks after delivery, depending on whether or not you have a C-section. And then right after that's over, you can implement the Paid Family Leave Act, and that'll give you an additional 6 weeks. And so altogether, you're getting about 16 to 18 weeks of paid time off with the 55% of your weekly income every week. And that's a drastic difference from unpaid. And I think it would make a lot of difference. I really also liked that their program also not only includes mothers and fathers, but it also includes adoptive parents and foster parents, which I think is a really big deal because just because the child isn't biologically yours and the mom didn't necessarily birth it, there's still a lot of responsibility and a lot of scheduling and a lot of adaptability that comes with a new baby in the house. And I think that kind of includes that aspect of it as well. So not only would parental leave benefit mothers and fathers financially, it would also produce positive effects on their physical and mental health as well. They are naturally going to be happier. They're going to be more content. They're going to be more focused at work because they feel like their child is safe at home and they're ready to be at home, with a grandma or with a babysitter or whatever. And their stress levels are probably going to go down because they're not dealing with that financial burden of, if I take time off of work, I'm losing time with my child. So studies have also shown that it helps to decrease gender inequality because you're kind of splitting that financial responsibility in the household, and the babies are going to see that growing up. So there's a lot of positive effects. It's a really good program. And basically what I would want to do is appeal to Congress by showing how California's program has worked and then implementing that on a federal level. So yeah, I hope that you will join my support. That's all I have. Do I have any questions?
All right. So I just have a quick question. So is this different from like maternity or paternity leave?
So it is basically maternity, paternity leave. But the difference is that right now, the government has only mandated unpaid maternity leave.
Okay. That's what I was just saying.
I don't know if it includes paternity. It did include adoptive parents and foster parents. But the biggest difference is it's paid versus unpaid. It's still called maternity leave.
Okay.
I have a question. It's are there any huge downfalls to your program?
I think the biggest downfall would probably be employers are obviously going to lose the workload. So if, even though someone's getting paid, like if a mom's getting paid to be out for 16 weeks, the employer is still kind of short-staffed. So they're probably going to have to hire someone to come in and replace them for however long they choose to be out. I mean, not every mom chooses to be out 16 weeks.
Right.
Majority of them do 12 weeks or whatever, but that could just be because 12 weeks is all they get with the unpaid leave. So then they're forced to go back. So I think the biggest downfall is probably that employers are definitely going to have to pay someone to come in while they're gone.
So I guess kind of like even though they don't have to necessarily like pay them because it's kind of, you said it's kind of like insurance, you still have to find someone else to pay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you talked a lot about California. So is there like any other states with like huge like programs in place that are just like similar?
Yeah, so there are multiple states, and they're all kind of based off of the Social Security, insurance aspect. But Rhode Island and New Jersey also have state mandated legislation in place. But out of 50 states, those are the only 3 that offer it. They basically require it by law.
So the other like 47 states is all unpaid.
Yes.
And say one business wanted, or one like corporation wanted to incorporate paid like maternity leave or paternity leave as a benefit, could they do that on their own, do you think?
Yes, employers are totally free to like choose employee paid leave.
Right.
If they want to do that. I mean, they could set it lower, like we'll pay you 30% of your original salary, and you can still have your paid leave. But it's completely up to the employer whether or not they even want to offer to pay. So I guess if you have a nice employer and they do that, then that is a benefit.
Right.
And so, like in California, is there any like tax raises that come into this program?
So one of the studies that I mentioned previously, it talked about when it was implemented, there was only a 1% increase on wages that equaled $95,000. So basically what that means is when they had the payroll tax in place, anyone who was making, if you're making $95,000, you saw a 1% increase in your taxes. So roughly $900 came out of your paycheck to go towards the program. But it was only a 1% increase, and I really didn't think that was bad at all.
I agree. So if anybody under 95,000 didn't see anything at all?
So basically, it was just like a percentage. So if you made 60,000, it would probably be around $600 that came out.
Okay.
Kind of like whatever you made, they just based it off of the 95,000, which was like a hefty salary to begin with.
Right.
If you made less than that, you would have less coming out for the payroll tax.
So in the United States in general, how do women get paid if there's no program for it in those other states?
It goes back to if the employers offer that as a benefit, or if they just say straight up that they're going to pay for if you have maternity leave. They are free to do that. It's not required by law, but some employers do actually offer that, I guess, as a benefit to working there.
Wow. Okay.
But definitely not.
Yeah. I think that's all the questions I personally have.
Yeah, that was a great discussion. So that pretty much wraps me up.
Awesome.
Good discussion.
All right, so I can go now. Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Jaleesa, and today I want to talk to you about abortion. So, abortion is the termination of a human pregnancy, but specifically in the past couple months, there has been an uprising pushing for women's rights across the board. But one of the main events that has spurred this push for women's rights is the change in abortion laws. So in May in Alabama, the governor, her name is Kay Ivey, signed a bill into law that basically banned all of abortions unless the mother's life was at risk or unless the fetal baby wasn't going to make it or didn't have a chance of surviving. But within this law, there was no exceptions for rape or incest at all. So according to Time, Alabama made an anti-abortion law similar to this over 150 years ago. So basically, they've kind of regressed 150 years, which is the opposite of progressive. And so the creation of this law goes directly against the pro-choice ideas and the campaign. And many people think that pro-choice is anti-abortion or pro-abortion in general, but really it's just the idea that women have the choice to do what they want. So at abortion.procon.org says that in 1973, the Roe versus Wade Supreme Court ruling was made, which basically says that women should be left the option and should have the right on their own to make the decision if they want an abortion. So this should be reason enough that Alabama should kind of come back on their law of it being the most restrictive in the United States and to really come back to like thinking about like why that Supreme Court ruling was made in the first place. And especially say they didn't want to come back to the Supreme Court ruling, they should at least have some sort of exception for incest or rape. So when a woman is raped and is a victim of that, they're basically what I just said is a victim. So when you force a woman to carry their baby to term, when they're a victim of rape, it's extremely mentally hard for them. And you're forcing them to carry the baby of the rapist. So it's really not their fault and it's really only the fault of the rapist. Also, when you force a woman to carry the baby that is a victim of incest, it's also probably one of the most mentally tough things to deal with, and the baby is very at risk to having birth defects. According to the Family Research Council, a baby is alive as soon as conception. So I can understand how many might think abortion is wrong in that aspect, but you have to try to empathize and put yourself into the shoes of people who are victims of rape and incest and how they may feel being forced to carry the baby to term. So many people who are pro-life or pro-abortion say that many women who have an abortion regret it after or have a lot of stress in it, which is understandable. However, if somebody is forced to have a baby who is a victim of rape or incest, can you imagine the amount of mental stress that they'd be put under then? So that argument doesn't really hold true. And according to thoughtco.com, it says that there obviously is stress involving an abortion, but it is often before and after an abortion, there really isn't much stress at all. And there's no evidence of post-abortion stress. So even if you have the mindset of taking a mother's stress into consideration, you have to consider it across the board. You can't just pinpoint what you want to consider. So Alabama is the most restrictive law in the United States as of now, and they want to push it to the Supreme Court. But these same people are resisting the gun control laws. These people are saying that gun control laws are a constitutional right, and if you try to ban guns or ban some kind of guns, that people are going to find a way to use them anyway. The right to bear arms is a constitutional right, so all of these statements are true. But how can you switch the mindset for this issue? So for politicians and government officials to think that women, if you make it illegal, that women who really want an abortion, specifically in the case of rape or incest, won't find a way to have one is naive. So receiving an abortion by a doctor is a safe procedure. However, if a woman tries to go do it on their own or using not a doctor, you put the baby and the mother at much more risk. Another point that people make is that it's against their religion. Many people who are Christian in this country, and a lot of politicians are Christian, and that faith states that abortion is wrong, which is understandable, and it's good to be profound in your faith and to follow its beliefs. However, the country is built on the separation of church and state. So if lawmakers and bill makers are putting their religion into making these laws, then that's really not based on what this country is built on. So they have to try to separate their beliefs from what their bills from what the bills that they want to make. So Kay Ivey, the governor of Alabama, is a woman and should see that how women, especially affected by rape and incest, feel and have some sort of sympathy for them. Having a law that bans all of abortions in general with no exception for rape or incest is really unfair to women and cruel to them. So I'm hoping Alabama will look in the mirror and understand that this is unfair and consider at least not necessarily putting their abortion laws back to the decision that Roe versus Wade made, but at least considering some sort of exception for rape or incest. So that is all. Thank you for listening. Okay, so any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I feel like this has been a really prominent topic the past few years, I guess. Why do you think that it's so big now rather than a decade or 2 decades ago?
So basically the Supreme Court in the Roe versus Wade hearing made this ruling in 1973, which is decades ago. But now that there's a different president involved and his views are very one-sided and they're very pro-life, which is fine and which is okay. But now many people are split on this decision. And because he is appointing new Supreme Court justices, the people who agree with Donald Trump's deals want to push this through to the Supreme Court because I think that they think, which is true, that it could have a better chance of going their way. And then you have basically the same thing on the opposite end, that like that people who are pro-choice are trying to avoid it from coming to the Supreme Court. So I think that's kind of why, like now in the recent years, it's been like a huge debate, and like it's so much more prominent now.
Yeah, and I also think that that's a really good point with the politics side of it.
Yeah.
But also, like, I definitely know, like, the medical advances, it's so much safer now than it was, 30 years ago to have
Right.
a doctor perform an abortion, because,
Right.
medical technology has advanced so much that you're basically not at a ton of risk like you were 30 years ago with practically
Right.
every medical procedure. But I
Right.
think that has a lot to do with it too, is now there's really no good reason why women shouldn't be able to have an abortion, because it is so safe.
Right. I agree.
So with the reference to Roe v. Wade, is it like, should you revisit the case Roe v. Wade because of that Jane Roe or student that came out and said she lied about the case, or like, is there some precedent in it?
No, I think that, I mean, you have to think about, it's over 30 years ago. A lot of things are outdated. So I think you can go back and revisit it, but I think there's obviously some things to consider, and you shouldn't just base the decision off of that Supreme Court case in general. But I think it is a good basis to go off of, being that it is a part of our Constitution now, and that maybe it is time for some updates and some changes, but I don't think you should totally disregard it from the conversation in general. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think the best chance of getting the law passed is to?
So, I mean, especially since politics are such a huge part of this decision in any part of the country, I think that the only way to make the law change, or to not change in general, is for the people to kind of not decide, but become less split and to kind of come to an agreement. So even if that is just that the Roe versus Wade decision is basically like, you can have it for any reason up until I think it's 24 to 28 weeks, but maybe you can lessen that amount of time, or it's just for the exception of rape or incest. So I think kind of coming to a compromise or agreement is like the best way to please everybody, I guess.
Sounds good. Is there any like gray area between pro-life and pro-choice movement?
So I think that the reason that there's been no decision and it's been such an issue for so long now is because there is such a huge gray area. There are millions of reasons why people get abortions every day. So to pinpoint and to come up with a rule that umbrella over them all is kind of almost unreasonable, which is why I think that it's been so split, and that coming to a decision that the whole country agrees with may never happen. So I think that the issue of abortion is such a gray area, and that rarely anything about it is black or white, is why it's like been such an issue for so long.
So going back to the unsafe abortions, I know I've heard a few ways, but have you heard a few ways that women have unsafe abortions? So like if there are laws preventing it, I know I took a women's class one time and we talked about different countries and the unsafe ways that they have abortions. Do you know of any that are super like popular in America, I guess?
Well, I know that the way that I know of a lot that I've heard of people doing is I don't know exactly what it is, but there's some like pill that you can basically take. It's not like a contraceptive pill, but it's like a pill that you can take that early on in pregnancy kind of just makes your body think that you're not ready for pregnancy. So it like almost terminates the pregnancy by itself. But of course, there's a bunch of different side effects to it where it may not work, and then you could have some birth defects, or you could have problems with yourself, where if you just kind of went to get the procedure done safely, there'd be a lot less risk factor to it. But that's like the only way I've really heard of it being like pretty popular.
Yeah, I heard of a few. I think the most common one, I can't remember the exact countries, but it was kind of those countries that are gray area, like you were saying, right, that they're really against it, but it's really necessary.
Right.
Was kind of like, I guess, injecting things that like damage their uterus as a whole.
Right.
And
right.
then they've ruined their chance of ever having a baby when they
right.
are ready. And so there's just a lot of really unsafe ways. And I do agree with you that that's what happens when laws are in place that are so restrictive, women feel like they don't have a choice except for to do it
Right.
the unsafe way.
Right. I agree. Any other questions?
I'm good.
That's right.
All right. Perfect. That wraps it up. All right.
Hey guys, I'm Alex. I'm going to talk about drone strikes again. So for those that don't know, drone strikes happened in the Middle East and like the northern tip of Africa, a country called Somalia. And those drone strike operators are like their facilities aren't in those countries that this is all taking place in. They're happening in like Pakistan, or like while these drone strikes are happening in Pakistan and Somalia, all these other countries in the Middle East, they're being facilitated from here in the United States. So these operators are working 12-hour shifts inside the United States, launching missiles at terrorist units, and they're taught to not consider their targets as human. They use terms like cutting grass and this and that to dehumanize their targets to make it easier. This still leaves them with a huge amount of like anxiety and PTSD that is similar to those found in active military units. But because they're not active military, not like in the war, many people overlook them and kind of consider them cowards even, just because they think they're making fun and antagonizing those people, like actually fighting the war. And there's not even just a psychological effect on these drone pilots. There's also a huge effect on the host nation civilians. According to an article from Taylor Owens in the Global Mail, he kind of outlines how the civilian population of these host nations that are allowing these drone strikes to occur are creating more enemies than they're defeating. So basically, there's like these small families that don't agree or disagree mainly with what's happening in their country, like these terrorism units, and like they perceive them as bad guys, and they don't mind the United States involvement. But when the United States starts launching missiles and killing friends, neighbors, families, kids, it causes a change in their mentality, which these terrorism units have been known to exploit by placing propaganda of like these big, evil Western civilization drones or robots that are flying above us, flying above them. They're constantly surveying them and watching their every movement and trying to kill them. So this is a big reason why there needs to be more regulation on these drone strikes. President Bush was the first to use drones, but Obama was the first president to implement the drone strikes as a foreign policy tool. And this is according to Jack Searle from the Bureau of Investigation. He said that Obama basically used 10 times more drone strikes than Bush, and that he was very open and adamant about using them. And his campaign even said that they were exceptionally good at killing and precise. This Bureau of Investigations also has a really good chart on how once drones were started to be used in war scenarios, that civilian deaths greatly increased. And while we think that we should be moving forward on this issue and like preventing civilian deaths, an NBC News article by Ken Dillion and Courtney Cube kind of shows how Trump went like polar opposite and removed complete accountability from drone strikes. And this allows drones to be used 24/7 without public knowledge or without any permission, taking into consideration death counts and civilian death counts. And this is a huge problem when you're looking at civilians churning and accountability, that you don't know how many civilians are dying. This being said, when Obama was using drone strikes, there was also poor accountability there, which may be a reason why this was unregulated, but it's really not. According to the University of Columbia and their law reports, they kind of show that civilian deaths in 1 year of 2011, and this was only in Pakistan. The United States declared that there was 3 to 38 civilians killed in these actions. And while this itself seems like a large range of deaths, it's really nothing to compare to like what other investigations found. Columbia independently did a study showing that 450 to 650 civilians were killed, and it's only increased over time as there is no accountability. So Obama has been one of the greatest users of drones, doing 10 times more than Bush. But currently, Trump is supposed to go past that within like this year, but we won't know for sure because there is no like records of these drone strikes. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I was just like, based on what you said, so the drone pilots themselves, they're not a part of the military?
They are part of like the military, but they're under the CIA usually. It's not like like they don't specify under Air Force or Marines.
Okay.
You know, the CIA has like contracts with the Air Force, so they can recruit people from them.
Got it. Okay. That's why I was just like a little confused. But yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Also, so drone strikes are like this issue of it being like unregulated and like the civilian deaths and stuff is kind of new to me. I don't really know a lot about it. So like, how do you think the public, like in the United States, feels about us implementing this to other countries?
I think a large portion of like the United States, especially now, doesn't know about it because like if you try to find death tools in countries, especially now that there is no regulations on it, it's hard to do. You have to find like a study from Europe or like these Middle Eastern countries, and there's a big worry that like they'll be tampered with just as a form of propaganda type deal. So it's really hard to know like what's happening, which is ultimately the scary part that we should be trying to.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know much about it at all, except for what you just told us. So yeah.
I have a question. So with the drone strike, do you think there's any positive side effects? Like maybe we're saving lives on our front, you know? I mean, are there any positive aspects, or do you think it really needs to be like restricted and regulated a little better?
So like these military drones that are only used for missiles and killing, they have a positive impact of killing a target that's like a possible leader. They have confirmed deaths of these leaders, but you shouldn't be able to outweigh one death with like 60 civilians dying on this one strike. But the military also uses other types of drones for like search and rescue and sending food and supplies to like countries that they can't really easily reach that like dislocated. So those have positive impacts. But for precisely military drone strikes, the ones carrying missiles and just kind of 24-hour surveillance, I think those need to be regulated a lot more.
Okay, yeah. So, I also really don't know that much about drones, so pardon my ignorance on the subject. But so like the military drones shoot missiles, so they can't do like they kill mass amounts, or can they do like individual targets?
So the missiles that they use are these like very precise missiles. But they're still missiles, so they have kill radius, and that's when, because they don't use like machine guns or anything else attached to these drones, it's purely missiles at most of the points. So blowing up convoys or just someone on the street, it's going to have a kill radius. So if like your kid is out playing outside, it's kind of a deterrent for them to stay outside, and like they're going to spend a lot more time inside their own house.
Gotcha.
So I know you said that now that Trump, he basically said that you don't need any approval and we don't really know about it. So has he changed anything else from Obama's policy regarding drones?
So Obama's policy with drones was basically the same as what we currently have, but Trump took out the part where we can't use drones in a non-hostile situation in these countries. So there is no further like, the regulations are basically the same, except we can't use drones when it's non-active military site, which is what it was the same before. It was just like he removed a policy that was saying the same thing that he said.
Gotcha.
So
Is it all that strict? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So does that include like the what you were saying earlier with the food delivery or like supplies delivered to needed countries?
So no, that would be as like own separate entity because it's not like harming anyone. It's not like a military attack. It's like the one that the EU or UA sends out supplies and they help deliver it.
What are the costs for these drone strikes?
So there's a bunch of different costs, and they've kind of tried to compare them to civilian costs, like a military cost. Like they try to compare a drone strike to that of like a human life, which I think is very difficult to do. But the basic cost that goes into a drone strike is that the cost of the drone, fuel, and like the cybersecurity that goes into the drone to make sure it's not hacked, because that comes out to like $36 million per drone strike, something like that, and it's $360 billion a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Obama used 10 times as much as Bush. You said, right?
Yes.
And then we think Trump is using more, or will use more, but we're just not sure because we don't really know.
Yeah, so according to like that NBC News source, it's just that Trump is on like the same path as Obama.
Right.
But because there's no exact number, we're kind of relying on these nations to tell us how many drone strikes there's been. And that's very unreliable, as you can imagine. It's just not a good scenario. So it's hard to say exactly how many Trump has used, but there's been constant raids in Somalia trying to like flush out terrorist units. And so this is just going to increase over the 4 years.
Right. Well, I don't have any more questions.
So
I think I'm good too.
Okay, so do we wait?
I think we're good to go. I mean, we finished everything.
Did we email? Did Dolores answer?
Yeah, she said that she forgot her password and that's why she couldn't get in. So she recreated an account, but you have to wait the 24 hours to Google Hangouts.
Oh.
So I don't think she's gonna be able to join.
Okay, then.
Yeah, if she figures it out, we can always jump back on here before 2.
Yeah, I agree. All right, cool.
Guys, it's been a great semester.
Bye.
Bye.